Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friday Night Live. Hope everyone's had a good week. Yeah, I was back in the office this week, which was interesting. Only 2 days, but still interesting. So I'll get on with the questions. First one, morning, William. Can we talk about self-worth? It's a cycle that always seems to get its claws into me. Feel worthless, so drink to stop the feelings, then feel even more worthless. Thank you. So it's kind of it's a bit of a difficult one, this, because what I tend to do is to break down alcohol and drinking, and explain how it becomes addictive, but I think more importantly to kind of explode some of the myths around it, like you need it to have a good time, it's good for you in small doses, all that kind of nonsense. And I don't go much into dealing with problems that might be there when you stop drinking. So for example, in this situation, um, of course, what we know about alcohol is it's a sedative, and when you drink it, your brain reacts to it, and it becomes essentially oversensitive, so that it can work under the sedating effects of the alcohol. So when it wears off, you're left like slightly anxious and slightly out of sorts. And as time passes, your brain becomes more and more proficient at countering the alcohol, with three results. Firstly, you can drink more. That's what tolerance is. Secondly, you need to drink more to get the same effect. And thirdly, that anxiety you get afterwards gets worse and worse, because obviously the more hypersensitive your brain becomes, the worse you feel afterwards. Um, so when you get that concept in place, you can see that any kind of drinking to alleviate an underlying problem, be that feelings of self-worth or trauma or a mental health issue, you might have anxiety or depression or sleeping problems, or even physical ailments, things that cause intense pain, will be alleviated by a drink. But of course, when the drink wears off, it makes everything worse. And of course, alcohol has a knock-on effect on our sleep. It completely ruins our sleep. So you're not sleeping properly. So it becomes worse and worse and worse. So I'm fairly good at describing that process, so people can hopefully then get away from alcohol. But what I'm not really equipped to do is to talk about those underlying problems and how you deal with them. I kind of see that almost as a separate issue. And I think the recovery industry at the moment's got a bit too much. It treats it as part and parcel of the same package, if you like, whereas I see it as two separate things. I think firstly, you see that the drugs aren't helping you and you look for a way out of that. When you've done that, a lot of people, particularly with alcohol, it's such a common drug, a lot of people find that when they quit drinking, that's pretty much the end of the problem for them. Yes, they have ups and downs, they have good days and bad days, but it is just life and they just get on with it. I think it is a minority of people discover they have got an underlying issue. And that's something, as I say, I don't really feel equipped to talk about. The one thing I would say, though, when we're talking about self-worth, and I think generally about like personality traits, they're always a double-edged sword, personality traits, because having like low self-esteem and low self-worth, the opposite of that, you could kind of say, like, is confidence and feeling very self-confident. But there's another way of looking at it, isn't there? Because people who have lower self-worth and less confidence tend to be a bit more modest, and people that are overly confident can be arrogant. So it's not always, I think often with personality traits, people say, like, I'm nervous, I'm not very confident, I'm this, I'm that, or the other. But the fact of the matter is, it's, as I say, it's a double-edged sword. There's always a plus side to it. Personally, I don't think anyone likes arrogant people, but they're not particularly nice to be around anyway. So I would just mention that with how you feel about yourself. So yeah, sorry, I hope that I've probably not really answered the question there, but it is, a difficult one to tackle. There's a few questions actually on this next topic, which is interesting. I think there's three altogether, so I've clumped them all together and I'll answer them at once. But other halves that still drink alcohol, without me being a complete arse to them, because I've read the books and know it's poison, they won't ever read the books or stop. One of these people that can just have a few. although they are drinking less now, it's more about me having to look at the drink, I think. How can we believe what is written in our books without being an idiot about someone else's drinking? P.S. I'm not being an idiot to them about it, but how do we cope long term? How do you cope if your wife drinks? And then there was another comment. There's been a lot of posts recently about being sober whilst a partner continues drinking heavily. Could you maybe expand on that, please? How to navigate your new sober life when you have a constant reminder of your old life 24/7? And the third one, my partner still drinks, not heavily. It does not bother, but it does bother me. I understand he doesn't see the problem with alcohol for himself, but it's frustrating. He doesn't seem to take anything I say seriously. Even the fact that 3 glasses of wine a week can increase certain cancers by 15%. Any advice on how to deal with a partner not taking your view on alcohol seriously? Thanks. So there's a few points there. Obviously, we've got people drinking heavily and partners drinking not very heavily. But I think that there's a few things to pick up on there. The first one's an interesting one because it says it's more about me having to look at the drink. How do you cope if your wife drinks? So my wife drinks occasionally, not very heavily, and I don't have any interest in it. She does she does lots of things I have very little interest in. Once a month, for example, she puts on panty liners, and I don't sit there and think, oh my God, I wish I could wear panty liners. It does not interest me. And other people doing it doesn't bother me. I think they're fools for doing it because I think they're being conned into it. But I would never vocalize that to them. I would never say it to them. I just let them get on with it. I mean, there's a lot of people in the world. A lot of them seem to be idiots. And I think you can't get too taken up with what other people do. You just do what you need to do. And other people do what they need to do. And you may look at them and think they're idiots, and they may look at you and think you're an idiot. And that's just the way the world turns around, I think. So as I say, it just doesn't interest me at all. It's just not something I have any interest in doing. The other comment here, how to navigate your new sober life when you have a constant reminder of your old life 24/7. Well, I don't think having a reminder of your old life is a particularly a bad thing, because when you're drinking, it's not a particularly pleasant life, is it? Which is why you want to stop in the first place. You're tired all the time. You wake up at 4 a.m. feeling awful. You feel lethargic. Losing weight's very difficult. Your fitness is gone to pot completely, and you hate yourself. And then you stop and everything is massively better. But one of the big problems with stopping is that life is better, but we humans are very good at taking things for granted. So when life does improve, you kind of just accept it and it becomes the norm. And then you forget about the reality of drinking, and all you remember is you used to have a drink and it used to make you feel good. What you forget is the feeling good is simply removing the misery, that anxious feeling, and that tiredness that it caused previously. So you kind of retain that. But I think having a reminder of your old life is actually probably not a bad thing at all. The third one, he doesn't seem to take anything I say seriously. Isn't that just relationships the world over, really? Even the fact that 3 glasses of wine a week can increase certain cancers by 15%. Any advice on how to deal with a partner not taking your view on alcohol seriously? To be honest, I've been on the other side of that, because for years I was the one drinking too much and my wife was saying to stop or to cut down, and I had absolutely zero interest in it. So again, how I look at it is, when you get married to someone, hopefully you have enough in common to spend the rest of your life with them. Now, time will tell whether that's the case or not, but you aren't the same person and you will have differences. Okay, that's a simple fact. And you need to sort of learn to live with those differences. Drinking alcohol may be one of them, and it's something you just learn to live with. As I say, I don't have any interest in it anymore. I don't envy people drinking. Like the other day we were invited out, my son's class, all the parents went out for drinks, and I just didn't want to go. I can't think of anything worse. So I stayed at home and read a book, and she went out. And again, it's just, she enjoys talking to other parents about how the school is doing, I don't. And so, we diverge on occasions. And I think that's just, part of a healthy relationship as well. So again, I think it's important just to recognize that. And I think also what is very important is your sobriety can't be reliant on other people. You have to make a decision for what is best for you, and you go forward with that. And if someone else around you is drinking, that shouldn't derail you. And I often say, people sometimes talk about it as a problem because I'm constantly being triggered, but I kind of see triggers everywhere. And I think if seeing someone drinking alcohol, if the thought of someone drinking alcohol is going to cause you problems, then you've probably got quite a lot of work to do on your sobriety anyway, because you're going to come across that an awful lot. Lots and lots of people in this society drink. Hello, William. You talk about relapses and how to come back from them. What worked well for me on the past was acknowledging the dangers alcohol had on the health. Unfortunately, that's not working now. Why does alcohol win over? So this is one of the problems with things. I think the dynamic is when you're getting sick of drinking and you're kind of stuck in this rut with it, you're kind of looking for a way out. So you're determined to stop anyway, and then something might come along which changes your view of it. So it could be, for example, here, the dangers alcohol had on your health. It might be suddenly realizing exactly how much damage it's causing you. It might be reading like a book like Alcohol Explained, or one of many other books, or going to AA, or whatever that might be. But whatever it does, it gives you a different perspective. It gives you a bit of momentum to quit. And so you quit. It's that something new that drives you forward to do it. Now, the problem is if you start again, what stopped you in the first place is no longer new. You already know it. So going back over it often doesn't work. I think one of the writers, I've got a feeling it was Jason Vale, in his book, actually says, if you start drinking again, this book will not help you a second time round. That's probably a bit extreme, because I think with a lot of these books, you might get something out of it the first time you read it, and you might get a completely different something out of it the second time. So I don't agree that that's always the case. But I think that there is that element with it, stopping with a method, and that goes for smoking as well, and all sorts of things. If you try the same method again, it's often not as effective as it was the first time. I think another element with that is, don't forget fading effect bias and looking back on the past more positively than it was. When we quit, it is often quite difficult and unpleasant, and then we start to feel better, we start to warm to sobriety, and it all sort of starts to fall into place with it. And then we tend to look back on it and think it's much easier than it was. We tend to forget all the hard work and build up that went into it. So that's probably worth bearing in mind. This isn't a question, but someone says 1 year alcohol free this week, so that's absolutely fantastic. Well done. A question: some people, including myself, seem to experience this unsettling feeling of life being not quite enough sometimes, an unclear void for something, even despite all the Maslow pyramid needs being pretty satisfied. In my drinking days, this feeling got lifted straight away when alcohol entered the system. The world then transformed to a peaceful place of harmony where all things were into places. Any thoughts on what this feeling is about and how to fill this soul hole in a healthy way? Soul hole. So I used to do this, and I think what it is ambition. So I think most people, and it's an innate human trait to want to better your life, and it's like it can feel almost like anxiety in you at times, that you want to strive and do more. I think it probably affects some people more than others. And I think it also gets affected by how content and happy you are in your life. So I think if you've got the perfect life and you're really happy, you probably relax into that. But I think if, I don't know, you're not quite happy with your house, you want something different, or you feel like you're not being stretched at work or getting paid enough, or you're not particularly happy with your partner, there's that feeling of wanting to improve things, and alcohol, being an anesthetic, will take the edge off that. So if you are someone who's either very ambitious, and that ambition isn't being fed by whatever in whatever way, or there's these areas of improvement in your life, then an anesthetic will take the edge off it, and it will feel like you want. This is I'm only speaking from my personal experience. This might be something completely different for you, but this is how I used to feel. And then I used to have a drink and I'd be completely relaxed. And what I realized was that feeling is a healthy feeling that is driving you to improve your life. Anesthetizing it is probably the worst thing you can do. You can do two things with it. You can anesthetize it, or you can use it to go on and do stuff. And frankly, had I not stopped drinking, I would never have done stuff, i.e., written Alcohol Explained and Alcohol Explained 2 and done all of this. And it doesn't happen immediately. It takes years. And the other problem with it is you're waiting for an opportunity. It's not like you can say, I'll stop drinking today and then I'm going to get this other job and buy a bigger house and, repair the problems with my partner or find a perfect. You wait. And that's what happened with me. I stopped drinking. I still had the job I hated, the house I hated, everything. I can't remember how long it was after I stopped drinking before I finally found a job that I liked way more. But it takes time. And so it's not something you can do immediately. You have to bide your time. But anesthetizing those feelings in the meantime is not the way forward. I'm convinced, forget the alcohol side of things, I'm convinced I wouldn't have ended up where I am in my career outside of, Alcohol Explained, had I not quit drinking. I was doing a job I hated. Since that job, I moved on to another job and another job. Both times was a massive pay rise, but both times I very nearly didn't take the job because it was such a big stretch from what I was doing. I was really uncomfortable making the move, particularly the second time. And I'm convinced that had I been drinking regularly, that timidity that it causes, that robbing you of your mental resilience, would have probably been enough to stop me making those moves. I just wouldn't have felt able to do it. And in fact, both times I just went for it and it's worked out okay. But I don't think it would have worked out that way had I not been drinking. So I would say if that is the same for you, you need to start looking at ways to improve your life and the things that you're not satisfied with, and start doing something about it rather than just anesthetizing it. It's like having an illness, a long-term illness for which there is a cure, or you can just take a painkiller and sort of paper over it and just keep going like that. And that's what you need to do. And it's a long process. It takes time and effort, but it's so worth doing it in the long run. And think about the alternative as well. What you're going to do when you're however old and you die. We do only get one life, whether you believe in life after death or reincarnation or nothing, whatever it is. We only have this one shot at this one life. Papering over your ambition and just anesthetizing it and ignoring it is not the way to live your life. You want to push yourself to the limit and do the best you can. Is it possible to get a phantom hangover? I know this sounds weird, but recently on 2 occasions I was having cravings all day and pretty much had decided in my head that I was going to have some wine that night. Turns out I didn't end up having any wine and just had dinner as usual, went to bed at usual time. No obvious variations at all from my normal routine, but suddenly woke up on both nights around 2:33 a.m, restless, agitated, thirsty, needing the loo and feeling like I'd been drinking. Had broken unsettled sleep till 7 a.m. and woke up feeling like I had a hangover. Right. Absolutely, it is. And it's really interesting that you've said there that you were craving and had decided you were going to drink. Okay. Because the human brain can't differentiate between reality and a vividly imagined situation. Okay. And as a typical, really obvious example of that, if you watch a horror film, your heart rate will go up. Now, the reason your heart rate goes up is because your body senses danger, and it's increasing your heart rate so that you're ready to either fight or flight, to either fight or run away from this danger. Okay, there is no danger, it's just a film, but it's imagined and you're in there. Now, I talked about before how your brain becomes oversensitive to counter the the sedating effects of the alcohol. Okay, it doesn't just do that when it senses alcohol in your system. It can do it either habitually, like if at 6 o'clock every night you start drinking, it will start going through that process. And equally, if you're really geared up to have a drink, it will start that. So if you've been craving for ages and decided, I am going to have a drink, your brain will be going about that recalibration process, which will then end up with you feeling tired and waking up in the night and all the rest of it, which is really interesting. And this again goes back to, it's worth bearing in mind cravings here as well. If you're craving something, fantasizing about it, thinking about it all the time, then it is going to have that same process. Also, and this is an aside, you need to do some work, because that's no way to live your life. That's no way to be sober. Having cravings all day and then thinking you're going to drink and then just by the luck of the draw not doing it is not good enough. You're going to end up drinking at some point. So you need to start changing how you view alcohol, frankly, or you're in trouble. There's another one here as well, because I get this sometimes, okay, and I don't go craving alcohol and decide I'm going to have it. But when you go out, you quite often stay up later than you would otherwise do. And the other thing we tend to do is we tend to eat a lot later. And both of those things will disturb your sleeping pattern. So quite often when I go out not drinking, if I stay out late and come home, I do feel a bit like that the next day. And it's just the disruption to sleep. But that's a very interesting question, that one. What are your thoughts on minimum unit pricing? Whilst it seems like yet another unwelcome tax following the national insurance hike, would you support such a move? It feels to me like some of these super strong ciders and lagers are far too cheap. Do you think subsidising non-alcoholic beer so it's cheaper would be a good idea? At the moment, a small pack of Heineken 0.0 costs me £4.50, yet you can get 4 large cans of the same brand alcoholic for £5. Yeah, I mean, it is irritating when you go to a pub or something and you're spending as much on a alcohol-free drink. I've kind of got mixed thoughts on that minimum unit pricing, because I think the problem is, I remember years ago, my sister complaining about being skint and my mum having a go at her, saying, well, you still manage to afford your cigarettes. And my dad kind of half jokingly saying, yeah, but no matter how skint you are, you'll always find money for necessities. And actually what he was saying was true. However skint we are, if we want to drink, we will find the money for it. And my concern with this minimum unit pricing is, I can see families where, the parents have got a problem with alcohol and they haven't got much money, and by putting the prices up, people are spending money on alcohol that might otherwise be free to go to the children. I'm also not a big believer in forcing people to stop. I kind of think it's probably impractical, but kind of a re-education for people, teaching them really what alcohol does and what it doesn't do, and how you can have a good time without it and all the rest of it would be far more beneficial. I appreciate that's probably pie in the sky stuff. But I'm not overly convinced. I mean, on the other hand, I can see, yeah, if you put the price up, less people will drink. But yeah, I don't think, again, it's probably out of my remit, to be honest. Like advertising, I never quite feel that comfortable talking about alcohol advertising as well. I don't really understand advertising. It's not my thing. So I'm not sure, but I'm not 100% gung-ho for it, to be honest. I can see it kind of backfiring in probably some of the more like young children, all the rest of it, people who are a lot more under threat. It's probably not working very well. I'm 10 months alcohol free and have gone through different emotions throughout that time. At the moment, I could literally cry with happiness. I just feel so grateful and happy to be finally free. Could it be the pink cloud? Will I hopefully stay like this, or will I come down from this high eventually, say in a few months in? Did you experience something similar? I couldn't have done with this without you. Thank you. So firstly, well done on 10 months. That's absolutely phenomenal. I'm not a big believer in the pink cloud. And let me just clarify this. I think people use the word the pink cloud almost as if it's like it's a false high you get when you quit drinking. It's almost quite disparaging. You see people put a post in saying, I've done 2 or 4 weeks 8 weeks, 2 months, whatever. I'm really enjoying it. This is fantastic. And people are like, oh, it's just a pink cloud. Like, as in, you're going through a false high and it will end. How I see it is alcohol does make you tired. It does make you anxious. It ruins your sleep. It increases your heart rate, which makes you feel lethargic. It ruins your fitness. It's not a pleasant lifestyle to be a drinker. Okay. And when you quit, initially you feel worse for a few days. But when those days start to turn into like a week and 2 weeks, you start to feel better and better and better. And you feel, for a lot of people, better than you ever did when you were drinking, even when you're having that crucial first drink of the day. So things become hugely better. And that is the pink cloud. I think that is life. And again, this is, I think, the difference between people who maybe have an underlying mental health issue or trauma or whatever. They quit drinking and they still don't feel right because they have this underlying issue. But I think most people who don't have that, they just feel so much better. The biggest thing I found, and I've referred to it before, but it's like mental resilience. When you're drinking, you're upsetting the chemical balance in your mind, with the sum total. The result of that is really, you don't feel as mentally resilient as you ought to be. You lose that confidence and that edge. And I think even if you do have an underlying issue, what you need to bear in mind is quitting drinking makes you the best version of yourself you can be. When you stop disrupting that chemical imbalance, when you get whatever sleep you can get that's a lot better quality, you become the best version of yourself you can. And you may have an anxiety issue, or I don't know, a trauma, or this or that or the other, but you're still the best version you can be. You might feel that you're very shy, you have low self-worth, whatever, but stopping gives you that opportunity to be the best version of yourself you can. So when you quit, you feel a lot better, massively better, and really positive. But as I said before, we humans start to take things for granted. So you wake up every morning, feel refreshed and happy and ready to go. And that's brilliant. And you really love it. And that's, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, after 6 months, a year, whatever, you're still waking up feeling brilliant, but you wake up like that all the time. And you just take that for granted. That's how you expect to wake up. So I think it's not so much a question of there's a false high, it's a real high, but over time we just stop taking it for granted. Someone's posted after this saying, where is it? After a long time of being on a plateau of nothing happening, I've recently felt I'm going through another one after nearly 3 years on. So maybe the pink cloud moments continue in bursts. So what I would say there is that I don't think it's anything to do with stopping drinking. I think that's life. So I'm 7.5 years not drinking now, and I go through good times and bad times. Sometimes I feel miserable, and there's a reason, and I know what the reason is. Sometimes I feel miserable and I don't know what the reason is. Sometimes I feel miserable and I think it's one reason, but actually it isn't. It turns out to be something else. And other times I'm just happy. So I think what you're experiencing now is life. How I deal with it is when things are going right, I just enjoy it. I don't question it too much. I don't worry about it ending. Just enjoy it while it's there. And when it ends, which it will do, unfortunately, but the thing is, when you stop drinking, it keeps coming back again. And what you should hopefully find is the bad days get less and less, and the good days get more and more, and in particular, more frequent. So just enjoy it while it's there, but don't let something coming along to make you feel miserable to derail you, because those things happen whether you're drinking or not drinking. And at least when something happens when you're drinking, when you're not drinking, you've got the mental resilience and the confidence to deal with it. I'm on day 25 alcohol free and I'm loving my new path. However, I'm still not feeling this full of energy and ready to seize the day, feeling that everyone seems to have after their first week. I have to admit, I'm tackling a few of my demons at once. And although it's been said one thing at a time, or I'm an all or nothing person. So I've given up sugar, a lot of carbs, junk food, and reduced my caffeine intake massively. Wanted to sort the drinking and my diet before getting back into exercise in a big way, as I have a shoulder injury going back to before COVID, when my drinking increased as I used alcohol to self-medicate. And that's when my lifestyle took a tumble. I feel so much better mentally now and I'm beginning to lose weight, but that energy boost just isn't there. I'm 41, so is it just an age thing, or do I need to give myself a bit more time, or will the exercise be the difference? So a few possibilities. There may be an underlying issue, but I think bear in mind 25 days is great, but full of energy and ready to seize the day that everyone seems to have after their first week. Not many people have it after a week. If you're a binge drinker like I was, yes, you will get that feeling in about a week. When you're a regular drinker, it can take a lot longer. And I'm sort of reading between the lines here, but you say you had a shoulder injury before COVID, and that's when your drinking increased. So we're looking at potentially you've been heavily drinking maybe for a year and a half to 2 years at least. Now, go back to the physiology. When you take a sedative like alcohol, your brain becomes overly sensitive. Okay, when you're drinking daily, that oversensitivity is in place virtually all the time because it can take 36, 48 hours for it to wear off. Okay, so when you're drinking every, 18 hours or whatever, it never quite wears off. So your brain is constantly in that hypersensitive stage. It's the equivalent of drinking lots and lots of caffeine all the time. And now you've stopped drinking, your brain's come out of that phase. And again, think about it. If you're drinking loads and loads of caffeine and you stop, what happens? You feel really tired for a bit. How long that tired? So what normally happens is you stop drinking, you feel really anxious and you can't sleep and you can't eat. And then after that comes like a period of feeling really tired and drained of energy while your brain, it almost swings the other way before it comes out. Now, I haven't quite pinned that down yet. The longest I've known someone to have that is about 4 weeks or a month. So you may very well find that you're still acclimatizing to that couple of years of probably regular heavy drinking. So you might well find you're not out of it yet. And certainly I don't know that lots of people feel that good after their first week. It usually does take a bit longer than that. Tackling a few of your demons at once, I'm totally with that. And I'm exactly the same. I think if you're going to do something, do it and do the whole lot. And plus, also bear in mind, if you're drinking regularly and you stop, you're going to feel rubbish for a few days. Why not feel slightly more rubbish and not caffeine on the head at the same time? Why not do the whole lot? And then come out the other side even better. So it might be linked to that as well. You're cutting out caffeine, sugar. You've given up sugar and a lot of carbs. So again, carbohydrates give you energy. And I know the big thing these days is like high protein to help you lose weight. But the reason protein helps you lose weight is your body struggles to digest it. It's hard for your body to digest it. So you fill yourself up with bulk and your body kind of struggles to get energy for it, which is good if you're trying to lose weight, but not so good if you want to feel energetic. So it might be the way the food you're eating might absolutely have an issue. 41, I don't think it's an age thing. I mean, I'm 45, and I still have quite a lot of energy. So I don't think it would be age. But what I would say is the two things that jump out on me there, 25 days, you may still need another week or two before you're properly out of that, particularly if you've been drinking heavily for at least a couple of years. And if you're still not feeling it, if you're cutting out carbs and having a very high protein diet, that is going to make you feel tired as well. So there might be a couple of things to look at. And of course, the other thing, people quite often miss this, and you don't say it here, but eating a big meal before bedtime, which is what most of us do, leaves you really tired because when you eat, your body has to divert a lot of energy into digestion. And it's like 20 foot of digestive tract, and you've got muscles that squeeze the food all the way through that 20 foot. So if you eat a load of food and go to bed, you will sleep, your brain will be turned off, but your body will be going nuts trying to digest this food. And as the food digests, it will cause heat. And that makes you sometimes wake up feeling hot. You might be uncomfortable from the amount you've eaten. So for all of those reasons, eating a big meal late at night can disturb your sleep as well, which is going to impact your energy levels. So you don't mention that, but that's certainly something just to look at. Thanks for all your help. I just wondered if you think alcohol will ever be shunned by society in the same way tobacco has in recent years, or do you think we're in too deep at this stage? It feels like there's hope, especially since quitting is such a straightforward choice when armed with the correct facts. do you think proper education could trigger a nationwide wake-up call? Yes and yes. I think alcohol is going the same way as tobacco. There's been a lot of articles recently about how so-called millennials are not drinking, not because they, hit rock bottom and have a problem. They just don't like drinking. It's just not a big thing for them. And I think more and more, when I first wrote Alcohol Explained like 7 years ago, there was not much out there. It was all AA, which is, it's great for some people, and I'm not going to knock it. But the fact of the matter is, AA is about, am I an alcoholic? Hopelessly and completely addicted to alcohol. If so, quit. If not, carry on. And that's how it was for years and years and years. Whereas now people are moving much towards looking at this substance and thinking, what is it actually doing for me? It tastes foul, makes me feel rubbish, and then makes me feel slightly less rubbish when I have another dose of it. Why am I even taking it? And more people are just stopping. And what I find really interesting in the group is the amount of people who, a few glasses of wine a few times a week. No one in the world would say they've got an alcohol problem, but they just don't like drinking anymore, and they're looking to stop. And that I think is that big shift at the moment. We're no longer taking it for granted that alcohol is great and only having to stop if we're addicted to it. We're actually questioning how good it is and questioning what it does to us. And that again, and yes, I absolutely think proper education could trigger a nationwide wake-up call, because people don't appreciate what it's doing to them. They don't. And I've had my hand bitten several times for suggesting this, but people drink through ignorance. They don't understand what it does to them. And they don't understand how most of its benefits are actually just illusions. We so take it for granted that it tastes good, that food tastes better with it. We absolutely take it for granted that a night out is better with drinking, to such an extent we don't even question it. And I think just stopping, making people stop and think about it. Yeah, there would still be millions of people still drinking, but I think a lot of people would quit, and a lot of people would drink a lot less. That's the other thing. Can you talk about relapses, please? Read the book many times, was doing great for 18 months, birthdays, Christmas, all-inclusive cruises, no problem at all, and then relapsed. I gained about 2 stone when I stopped, and I was really unhappy about that, so decided I was better drinking now as I'm fat. How crazy is that? Just got home from holidays with friends, drinking poison for 2 weeks, and really need to get back on track. Thanks. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? I gained about 2 stone when I stopped. So again, I don't want to sound really facetious or anything, but you put on weight when you consume more calories than you burn off. Okay, so there's 2 ways of losing weight. One is to eat a bit less or eat more healthily, because healthy food has less calories in it. So, an amount of fruit and vegetables is going to have an awful lot less calories than a similar amount of cheese and chocolate. Okay, so two ways of losing weight. One is to exercise more, and one is to eat a bit less and or eat a bit more healthily. Consuming an addictive carcinogen is not going to help you lose weight. And if you look at yourself and think, I'm overweight, the reason you're overweight is your diet and your exercise. People aren't overweight because they're failing to take an addictive poison, particularly one that tastes so foul that we have to lace it with massive amounts of refined sugar. If you have 2 large glasses of red wine with your meal, it's the equivalent of having a Big Mac with it. Think of that next time you see someone having a glass of wine with a meal. Like you've got your, I don't know, pie and chips, and then you've got a Big Mac stuck on the side just to wash it down with. So that probably needs a bit of thinking. I have talked about how the relapse is a difficult one, because sometimes it feels like we quit using this certain method and it feels like magic, and then we go back to it again and it just doesn't seem to work the same. And don't forget, there's 2 elements to that. Firstly is it probably wasn't quite as easy as you remember it being in the first place, because you probably had months and months of building up to it and getting sick of it and wanting to stop before you actually got there. And secondly, it's that change, it's that drive, it's that seeing something in a different way and thinking, oh, wow, okay, I feel like I can do this. Because if you're going over the same ground again, it might not give you that drive. So getting back on track is absolutely the thing. I don't go much in for one day at a time, and I did a chapter on this, I think, in Alcohol Explained too, purely because I don't think it's a particularly good way to live your life. You shouldn't be limping from one day to the next, just going to bed sober. Doing that is better than drinking, don't get me wrong, but the ideal situation should be, I don't want this anymore, I'm done with it, I'm perfectly happy, and now I'm going to get on with my life. That's what you should be aiming for. Do one day at a time if you have to, because it's better that than drinking. But what you can do is just say to yourself, because a lot of people just struggle with those first few days, just give yourself a week. I'm not going to drink for a week, because after a week, the anxiety, that overstimulation would have started to disappear. You will be sleeping better and you will be feeling a lot better. And of course, there's the whole thing that you'll be breaking the habit as well. So just do what you can to get those first few days under your belt. But what I think is interesting as well is and this is one of the reasons people struggle. We're kind of getting out of holiday season now, but people have this idea of going on holiday and having a really nice time drinking, but it isn't, is it? It's just grim. Sat there exhausted, just horrible. I go on holidays now, and I never thought this was a thing, but I actually take my running kit and I get up in the morning and run. It just feels so good all day, and sit and read and have a sleep and some nice food, and it's so nice. And drinking would just demolish that. Anyway, my 31-year-old daughter is like this. Granted, she doesn't drink at home, and I don't allow it, but a few times last week she went out and came home after 1 a.m. stumbling drunk, couldn't get in the house, ripped the screens off the window. Boy, was my husband pissed. Told her, obviously American, because in the UK, pissed to us means drunk. In America, it's annoyed. Told her no more. She comes home like that again, she's going to have to find somewhere else to live. She won't go to any counselling and knows she can't drink like that and it will not happen again. So she tells me today that next weekend she's going to New York City with her girlfriend. We live in New Jersey, and the Renaissance Festival, which I know has drinking. I said, they have alcohol. How are you going to handle that? She says, no idea. I guess I'll find out when I get there. So she won't be home that weekend. So I know she most likely will be drinking. So, I mean, this is a simple one, isn't it? Because this is something that a lot of people struggle with. They go out, they don't intend to get drunk, but they do get drunk. And then they're left scratching their head and a lot of beating themselves up and, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I don't think counselling what she needs. I think you just need to explain to her the dynamics. When you take an alcoholic drink, your brain becomes hypersensitive to counter the effects of the alcohol. When the alcohol wears off, the hypersensitivity remains. So what happens in practical terms is you have a drink, you feel slightly dulled, but when it wears off, it leaves a corresponding feeling of anxiety. Okay, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So whatever relaxing effect you get from alcohol, when it wears off, you have a corresponding feeling of anxiety. Now, what's the quickest way? Well, 2 ways to get rid of that feeling of anxiety. One is to wait a few hours or days, and eventually the brain chemistry gets back to normal. But far quicker way to get rid of it is to have another drink. Because the reason you feel awful or horrible or anxious or just out of sorts and unpleasant is because your brain is geared up to work under the sedating effects of the alcohol, but there's no alcohol there. So it's racing ahead. So you take some more alcohol, you immediately correct that chemical balance and you feel better. So every drink creates a desire for the next drink. Now, there's another aspect here in that alcohol does two things. It relaxes us and it intoxicates us. And for years, we all looked at that and just assumed that it's part and parcel of the same process. You get relaxed and intoxicated, but actually they're two separate processes and they run their course at separate times. The relaxing effect of alcohol wears off far quicker than the intoxication does. So if you go out, like if your 31-year-old daughter goes out and has a drink, she will be 1 drink relaxed and 1 drink intoxicated. But in 10-15 minutes, the relaxing effect will have worn off, but the intoxicating effect won't have. So she'll take another drink to get rid of that unpleasant feeling. She will then be 1 drink relaxed, but 2 drinks intoxicated. And then when that drink wears off, she'll have another one, and she'll feel 1 drink relaxed and 3 drinks intoxicated. So as we go through the evening, constantly chasing that feeling of relaxation, we become increasingly intoxicated. It's a completely normal and natural process. Nothing to scratch your head about, nothing to beat yourself up over. If you take alcohol, you will end up drunk. That's how it works. So what I would say to you is to sit down with her and explain that to her. This is the kind of thing I think is invaluable for people to understand, because when they start to understand how 1 drink causes the desire for the next one, and as you have that next one and the next, you become intoxicated, you can probably make some much better choices around what she's doing. And again, don't forget how's she looking at it. She's looking at this in, she's young, she wants to go out with her friends, they're going to have a drink. Drinking makes me feel good. I probably won't enjoy myself if I don't have a drink. And you know what, I'll just have 1 or 2 this time. But what she won't factor in is, in the heat of the moment, as the drink wears off and starts to feel unpleasant, she doesn't care what happens tomorrow. She just wants to enjoy herself. So she has another one. Her friends will all be there pushing drinks on her. She'll end up getting drunk, and then she'll wake up the next day feeling awful, thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Not understanding there's nothing wrong with her. It's the drug that's the problem. So as I say, you might want to just sit down and have these conversations with her and explain it to her. I have a question for. I discovered Alan Carr's book about 8 years ago, which William references in Alcohol Explained. It had a profound impact on how I viewed alcohol. I was 39 at the time, and having drank most nights since I was about 18, I immediately stopped drinking after finishing the book. I stayed very happily alcohol-free for about 4 months and then fell back into it for no real reason that I can recall. Since then, I've greatly regretted starting up again and fallen into a cycle of drinking for periods of 5 to 6 months, then stopping for 2 to 3 months, but never managing to quit for good. Whilst I fully agreed with everything the book states, for me, it didn't adequately explain how the unconscious mind causes cravings for alcohol, and this was the missing part for me. This past month, I've read Naked Mind by Annie Grace and Alcohol Explained 1 and 2. Having read these 3 books, I feel much more confident that I have added resolve to quit for good, but I'm only 4 weeks into the journey. I know this is covered in some degree in your books, but I would be so grateful to hear you articulate what steps I should take to this time avoid losing my resolve after 2 to 3 months. Thank you for the wonderful work you are doing. Right, so the 2 parts of the book you need to look at are fading effect bias and ambition. Okay, both of those describe the same process, whereby the longer we have stopped for, the more attractive alcohol becomes, purely because we start to. Fading effect bias is essentially where we look back over past events and think they were much more positive than they were. Okay, it's a universal human trait. By that, it bypasses cultural or national boundaries. Every human being has this, and they look back on past events and think they're more positive. So the longer you stop for, the more likely you are to look back on alcohol and think, I wasn't that bad. It was really good fun. Boy, do I miss it. I'm sure I'll be fine this time round. Okay, you need to be aware of that. Ambition is something I sort of came up with, and it's basically, I'm not really necessarily talking about it in its narrow sense of, you know, wanting to do well at work, but more a driving force in not just human beings but all living things, and that's a desire to improve our lot in life. I've talked about this just at the beginning of the life, but we want to improve our lives. Okay, and that desire to improve is broken down into 2 separate things. One is being very critical of what we have, and the second one is idolizing what we don't have. So when we quit drinking, and this ties in a bit about what I was talking about that pink cloud, our life is massively better. We start to take it for granted, and then sobriety it becomes something that we have, so we become very critical of it, and drinking becomes something we don't have, so we start to really idolize it and fantasize about it and think how great it was. So both of these things feed into that. The more time that passes, the more likely you are to look back on drinking and think, you know what, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't that bad. I'd like to go back to it. How to keep your resolve is simple as just sticking with the reality, because both of these things, they don't change reality. They just warp your view of it. Okay, and sticking with the reality is the main thing. See it for what it is. It's a foul tasting carcinogen that is a drug, and it's so bad tasting we have to water it down and add a load of refined sugar before we can even drink it. It's also most of the time served cold. Now, the reason we like it cold is because we taste things less when they're cold. Taste is a chemical reaction between your mouth, your tongue, and whatever substance comes into contact with it. Now, when something is hot, the molecules in it vibrate more. That's what heat is, and that's why things expand when they're hot, because the molecules are all moving around and taking up more space. So when you have something warm, basically warmth speeds up the heat of a chemical, the pace of a chemical reaction. If you have something freezing cold, you can't taste it. That's why most of the drinks we drink cold. There are a few exceptions like red wine, but they tend to be very strong flavors from the grapes and all the rest of it anyway to mask the alcohol. It makes you feel slightly dull and tunnel visioned before wearing off, leaving a corresponding feeling of anxiety. It ruins your sleep, increases your heart rate, which leaves you feeling very lethargic, and essentially ruins your life. Stick with that and you can't go far wrong. The other thing you can do, I did this a lot, not really even consciously, but the part of drinking I used to hate the most was waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning feeling exhausted but totally unable to go back to sleep. And again, that's that chemical imbalance. And just lying there feeling awful, tired, anxious. And every time I looked at an alcoholic drink, I would see that, not some kind of ridiculous, idolized fantasy of how I could have a drink and my life would suddenly be perfect. I would see that. And the reason that's a good one is even if you're kidding yourself, you're only going to have 1 or 2, you'll still get that because even 1 or 2 drinks will interrupt your sleeping pattern. Okay, and just pull that out every time you see a drink. See that as the reality. You go on holiday, everyone's sitting around the pool drinking, see them waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, lying there. The whole complex, apart from you because you're the only sober one, you'll be relaxed and sleeping through. And pull that out every time it happens. Excuse me. I hope that was useful for everyone. Have a good weekend, everyone. I'm back next week, so I shall see you then. Goodbye.